Our wheels tend to get a lot of attention, both positive and negative. And this is a bit of an overview as to what led us down this path and to perhaps answer a few of the questions that have come up along the way. When I first started designing this car, which would have been back in 2013, there was a lot of activity, or rather there was a kind of the start of the activity around the Porsche world. Singer had just launched its first car, an amazing vehicle, and they do very, very good work. Magnus's Urban Outlaw movie had just been released, and there was quite a lot of activity around these classic vehicles kind of getting a new lease on life. But the concept of an urban outlaw, or let's say a modified 911, wasn't new, certainly not new at the time. A lot of guys at the time were racing 911s, stripping them down, making them lighter. And there was a certain aesthetic to that with these kind of stripped out, lightweight, increased performance cars. And I loved them, loved the look of them. And I had at the time a view that we were going to see an increase in that. So we undertook this build project. But one thing I really wanted to do was to try and give ourselves some form of distinctive look over the number of other cars that were out there in the market. So Fuchs obviously are an amazing wheel. We'll talk about that certainly in one of the other episodes. But everybody was using Fuchs wheels. And I just felt that there was an opportunity for us to be able to distinguish the look of our car from other vehicles out there in the market by way of a unique wheel. And what a lot of people don't know is, in fact, I took the lead, in fact, from the American muscle car market, where what they've done is they had very classic cars, or they have very classic cars, and the only way that they give away the fact that this car is in some way modified is by way of a kind of a contemporary wheel. What they also tend to do in the American muscle cars is that they widen those wheels to the inside, that way, instead of this way. And what that does is it retains the classic lines of a car, and at the same time gives you the increased traction of a wider wheel at the rear. Now on a 911, that's not the easiest task to achieve, because you've got certain limitations in terms of how far inward you can go based on how the setup works in the rear in terms of suspension. What we did is, that was the primary decision we took. I did not want to have this car have a wider rear than the front. And if you notice on a 912, which is an E-shaped body, the front is in fact wider than the rear. And that gives this car a very classic look and an understated kind of performance, because what it's tucking behind is in fact a wider, larger set of rubber sitting on a bigger rim. Now, one of the key design, let's call it criteria, that we gave ourselves from the very start here was to never move outside of the Porsche world. So that rim that you're looking at is in fact a Cup 1 rim that was introduced in the 964 range. It's a rim which is iconic in terms of its look on a 964. So we then took that rim and then modified it. So it's still a Porsche rim, but it's been modified. The question now is, how did we modify it? Initially with paintwork and a lot of design work, but ultimately we got these rims onto a 3-axis lathe. And if you can see there, you can now see that there's actually a physical cutaway of a Fuchs pattern onto a 964 rim. And all of that material has physically been machined away by way of a 3-axis lathe. And obviously that removes a bit of weight, which is important to us, but it also then gives us this unique looking wheel or rim, depending on which country you're in. It's a 17-inch rim. All of them, in fact, are the 7J profile off the front of a 964. The offset is obviously a little bit more wide, to use a non-technical term. So what we then had to do to ensure that they fit within a very narrow body on the inside was to in fact split the rim. So just to be clear, splitting the rim that way, removing an amount of material and bringing the rim in so that it becomes a narrower wheel, which then can sit inside of the car. Obviously gives us a bit of weight saving, but this here is a different challenge entirely, which is the offset itself, which is how far the rim comes out from the outside of the body. Now on the front, given that this is an E-series, you'll notice that we are extremely tight. So we've got a very, very small amount of room here. We manage that by way of a slightly tighter suspension. We've got some amazing mechanically minded people who helped me a lot with that. At the rear, however, that required a bit of body work. And what a lot of people don't know is that an E body, which is from certainly in the 68 year, they started to move to F in the 69, 70s. The rear of the car is narrower than the front, and we then had to widen this part of the car. Now, in working with the bodywork guys, I was incredibly kind of resolved in the fact that I did not want to see a flare. I did not want to see this car flare at all. And in my opinion, I wanted the car to, in fact, not look like it was flaring, but almost have the wheels look like they were recessive inside, or they were receding inside of the bodywork. Because those are the little visual clues that we get from classic cars. They shouldn't have wide wheels. They should almost sit inside the body. So we had a very interesting time manually cutting and shaping that fender, and obviously both fenders. So a manually shaped fender sitting inside a body that is in fact narrower on the rear than it is on the front, with a very, very small, tiny little widening. And if you look at the rear here, this is in fact a standard F rear bumper, and they meet perfectly. Now I need to take my hat off to the wonderful people that did that manual shaping. Andrew, you'll know that you're in that mix, so I need to thank you for that. But at the end of the day, that's what we did. So to answer a few questions about our wheels, they're not available. We don't sell them with any of the, well, we don't sell them on their own. We only sell them with the cars that we manufacture. They're a bit like Marmite, to use a term. Some people love them, some people hate them. But our view is simple. My view is simple, is they've become synonymous with, let's call it, the design of our cars. And I must point out that the key objective that we wanted to achieve, which I'd like to think we have achieved, is that this car, whilst totally classic and retains its classic lines, has this very unique contemporary feel to it without in any way kind of belying its classic roots. And that came down to some very interesting machining. So thank you very much for paying attention to that one. I hope that's answered some questions.